Hi everybody, I am finally back on my feet and spiffied up, so welcome to our video supplement. As I record this, I imagine some of you are in a small frenzy putting the finishing touches on your first paper. If you're watching this thereafter, congratulations on getting it done. I'm sure I'm excitedly reading it as you're watching this. A few notes I want to make about the class through this point in the year. We're approaching the midterm and how we're going to move from here on in. First of all, you should know that certainly by the time you've seen this, I've corrected or graded all material through October 1st. Now, that includes both the Pinterest feeds, your visual log, and your online discussion participation. The Pinterest feeds are supposed to be at minimum one posting a week. Also, ideally, they're supposed to be images that you find. Now, you could find them on the internet. I certainly have no problem there. And you could find them on Pinterest. But if you do that, please stay aware. Please keep watch of my own feed, because I'm noticing that some people are duplicating what other students have already posted. This isn't cheating by any means, but I can't give you the same credit for something that's already been found, that we've already seen, and that in fact I may have already reposted as an example of what I've liked or seen. So you might be safer taking pictures in your environment, whether that's at home, at your job, as you travel around Boston, or perhaps as you travel beyond Boston. Uploading pictures may be more successful. And again, once a week is the minimum. People who scored above a B+ have been uploading a good amount of high quality images that had direct relevance to the class. People who scored a B and below either were barely meeting the minimum, repeating some images, or putting up images that I didn't see any overt connection to religion or religiosity or spirituality. So you can also take the opportunity to explain or caption your image when you load it on Pinterest. As for the discussion board, some of the discussions were excellent, and I flagged those that I thought were really good examples of interesting thought, intensive writing, carefully proofread and properly punctuated. That did a few people in. And of course, those that were put in on time. Some people spoke in very vague generalities or focused the entire discussion on themselves, on their own personal experience, rather than on any materials we were considering. And I couldn't give those as high a credit as those people that really tried to address from perhaps either an objective or from several different standpoints the material that we're covering. So if you're looking to improve your discussion board grade, certainly make sure you're on time. You can consider doing beyond just the minimum. I put up an optional board every time. You can also propose something or add something that you'd like to say. Having it written well, properly punctuated, properly spelled, all of that is a great help to your grade. It shows care and thought. And then, of course, aiming these around 500 words. Now, I know that for the Bhagavad Gita one, I did not necessarily stipulate 500 words. That's okay. But there were people that just gave me the smallest piece that they could, and that wasn't entirely satisfying. There's a new set of discussion board questions up now, the second one for Judeo-Christianity, and I hope everyone will tackle that. There'll be one additional one before we finish Judeo-Christianity. The deadline for that quiz is October 25th. Speaking of Judeo-Christianity, we just got through some of the Jewish high holidays. That would include Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We also just passed Sukkot. At this point, you should be moving through the lectures and going through the transition between Judaism and Christianity. And there are two individuals I'd like to call out that I don't think get proper consideration in either the lectures or in Robson's chapters. That first individual is Paul. Now, I do make mention of him in the lectures, but I think one thing I neglect to emphasize is what a shaping hand Paul has on what we consider Christianity today. And what I mean by this is, please listen to the lecture first about Paul's conversion from Saul of Tarsus, a Jewish Pharisee and persecutor, to Paul, the replacement, if that's not unfair a term, apostle for Judas Iscariot and one of the main church apostles. The reason I want to focus on Paul just ever so briefly is that his writings make up, if not a majority of the New Testament, then the most significant one-author chunk. His epistles, his letters, take up a great deal of space in the New Testament. And we have those that we know Paul wrote, those that we think Paul wrote, and those that were probably attributed with Paul's name, but may not have been his actual hand. The point I want to make here is that the earliest of Christian theology, Jewish Christian theology, before they were totally separated or splintered off, comes from Paul's establishment of these communities and his letters to them. In fact, it could be said that Jewish Christianity in the first century goes from being a religion of Jesus to a religion about Jesus. Or another way to say that is that Christianity goes from being Jesus's religion to a religion of Christ. If you remember, in whatever gospel you choose to look at, and please remember you are required to read the Gospel of John and one of the other synoptic gospels, Jesus is largely the messenger. He performs a number of miracles, and indeed does sacrifice himself, but most of his time is spent teaching a message. Paul, when he writes about Jesus, turns Jesus into the message, turns Jesus into the thing that is, or the person or the force that is received. So really, Paul is the one that focuses Christianity not on Jesus's teachings, although that is included, obviously, but more on Jesus himself, his person, and ultimately his divinity. So I would pay close attention to that. One other note I would make about Paul is he didn't run roughshod. That is to say, we can still find in the New Testament some opinions that disagree with Paul, specifically in the general epistles, those letters not written by Paul. I believe it's in the epistle of 1 Peter. Peter talks about how you need both faith and works, belief and action to be a Christian. Whereas Paul was only emphasizing that people had to believe, had to be justified by Jesus, what we call the theology of the cross. So already in the New Testament, you have Paul's theology of you don't need to be Jewish, you can just be a Gentile and immediately convert into Christianity. Paul himself was originally Jewish, as Saul, as a Pharisee. But we also have traces of some other thoughts in early Christianity. 1 Peter suggests that you must also act as a Christian, perform as a Christian, not just believe. And what we have of Peter also suggests that he was pushing for Judaism to be a prerequisite for Christianity before augmenting to Christianity. That Judaism was level 1 and then Christianity was level 2. Different denominations of Christianity have taken these philosophies in different directions. And ultimately, by the time we get to the 2nd century, it'll be the Council of Jamnia, a council of Pharisee Jews who decide that the Jewish Christians are not Jewish. So there'll be a definite separation that ultimately decides the matter for Paul and Peter regardless. Okay, one individual I want to bring up, and that's St. Augustine. St. Augustine won't come around until about the 4th century. And even though I give a good amount of time to Constantine, Emperor Constantine, and the legitimization of Christianity in the Roman Empire, I want to take 1 minute to look at the theologian Augustine. He's, of course, not the only Christian theologian. We have a great many, Thomas Aquinas, Origen, and so forth. But Augustine's really notable for the major reason that, first of all, he wasn't born Christian. In fact, only his mother was Christian. For the beginning of his life, he was Manichaean. That is, he belonged to a pagan cult and was actually rising up that cult before he became disillusioned with it. He loved sex, promiscuity, fun, music. I'm not saying they're all the same thing. Don't quote me on that. And he had a child out of wedlock with a lover that he kept for most of his life. It isn't until his 30s that Augustine sees that Christianity may be the way from him. He has a theophany that's like an epiphany except from God, and does finally officially convert to Christianity 5 years later, becoming the lead priest of Hippo. And then later in his life becoming Saint Augustine, the writer of a great deal of Christian theology. I'm emphasizing this because Augustine sets a standard. He is a man of the world. He's not sheltered. He was actually employed by the Roman emperor as a rhetorician, that is, a speechwriter, just like you could imagine President Obama having or Mitt Romney having. So St. Augustine goes from taking in the world in all of its secular, political, economical, financial ways, and even in a spiritual way, the Manichaeans that are not ultimately satisfying to him, and only later sees Christianity as his path. I think too often we think of these saints retroactively. We think of them as saints first and then having a biography prior to that. Augustine's biography, which he himself recounts in rather raw and explicit detail in his work, The Confessions, his biography is one where he was struggling, trying to figure out life, tasting every aspect of it, and only towards his middle life, later, finally becoming focused on Christianity, dedicating his life there, and focusing his incredible intellect on writing for Christianity the remainder of his life. So don't just see the saints as sort of blah saint. They were always holy. They don't know what life was all about. They didn't experience both sides of the fence. Augustine very definitely did, and probably more than some college students I know. Anyhow, don't overlook Augustine, and I will get one more chance, one more video supplement to talk about a few more highlights of Christianity, bringing us into the modern era and the current discussion with Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists, and all the different branches that come out of the Great Schism between Rome and Constantinople, and then the Reformation, the Protestant break between Rome, Catholic Rome, and Protestant England. But that's for another video. Have a good week. Go to the discussion board, pin those Pinterests, and I'll talk to you all soon.